My name is Zaya Toma, and I'm making a 4-part series of videos on the structure of governments in Australia and how to lobby, or the importance of lobbying for us at MDA. The video is for the members and friends of the Multicultural Disability Advocacy Association. If you missed part 1, I encourage you to go back and have a look at that, because it's very important to know those details before we get into what we're going to talk about in this video, which is part 2. Part 2 is about making laws, or the making of legislation, and the process of how laws are passed in Australia. They're very similar at both a state and federal level. The local level of government, again, is not a constitutionally recognised level of government, and they don't actually make laws. What they do is they have policies that they can pass at council meetings, which influence how the organisation operates, but the actual legislation is something that only the state and federal governments can do. To give you a very overall view of how legislation is passed, first a bill is put to Parliament. That bill is voted on. It goes to the Governor-General, who gives a royal assent, and then it becomes enacted, it becomes a law. But there are 2 types of bills. There's government bills and member bills, because any member of Parliament can move a bill or put a bill on the table for debate or to be considered. But generally, it's left to the government to do that, the government ministers. And there'll be a trigger, there'll be a reason that a law needs to be made, and that could be because the community has lobbied for it. Something like that we would do. We would be lobbying for certain things that we think are in the interest of the community. It could be because a problem has occurred and it's been brought to the attention of the minister through a government department. So, for example, if the police notice an increase in the level of people using mobile phones while driving, that gets reported to the police minister, and he's given advice that a new law is needed. More demerit points are needed to fine people, or it could be just because of a political reason. But for whatever reason, it's come to the minister's attention that a new law needs to be made, and that is triggered. So what he will do is come up with the gist of what the law needs to be. So, for example, he would say, I want a law that fines people for using their mobile phones while driving. Now that will go to the Parliamentary Council's office, and these are the lawyers and who will actually draft the legislation, the bill, into a draft bill form, and they will give it back to the minister. Now they are the experts; they know how to make what the minister wants a reality. So it's basically, he just says, this is what I want, and he gives a general idea, but it's the Parliamentary Council that word the bill in such a way to make it presentable to the Parliament. Now, if a private member wants to move a bill, he still goes through the Parliamentary Council to get the draft bill, the wording of the draft bill. But at the moment, we'll just talk about the government ministers. So the government minister has the draft bill in his hands. It goes to a House committee. So the lower house or the Senate both have what is called a House committee, and that is made up of a group of members of Parliament who are interested in particular issues, such as the Finance Committee or the Foreign Affairs Committee or the Law and Order Committee, and they will consider it on behalf of the entire House, and they'll have their recommendations on the bill put. So they might recommend voting for it, or they might recommend not voting for it. Then it goes to the lower house, or it can be put into the Senate. But let's say it goes to the lower house. So there's what is called a first and second reading. This is when the bill is read and members of Parliament get up and they give speeches, and they have a vote on the first reading, and then they do that through the second reading. There's also a third and final reading, and all of them are the same. The members of Parliament are allocated to give speeches, and then they vote. Once the third reading is done, the minister has the right of reply, so he thanks all the members of Parliament that have spoken on the bill. He might address some of the concerns that were raised, and then there's the third and final vote. If the bill is passed through the lower house, it goes to the Senate. It goes through the exact same mechanism, the first, second and third readings. If it passes the Senate, it then goes to the Governor General. That is because Australia's head of state is actually the Queen. So she's at the moment the Queen of England, but she's also the Queen of Australia and other countries in the Commonwealth, such as Canada. So she actually has to sign the bill in to make it legislation, to make it a law. But she can't sign all of the bills, in Canada and England and Australia. So she's delegated that role to the Governor General. She appoints a Governor General on the recommendation of the government. And in Australia, the Governor General signs off on the legislation, making it what is called enacted. Once it's enacted, it will have a date when it comes into force, and from that date, it's now a law of Australia. If a private member was to do it, to move a bill, it would become a private member's bill. It wouldn't actually go to a committee, it would just be put onto the table for debate. Members of Parliament would still get to vote on it in a first and second reading, and then a third reading, and then he would have the right of reply as the mover of the motion to address any concerns before the third and final vote, and then it would go on to the next house. If a bill comes in through the Senate, it gets passed through the Senate, but then it goes to the lower house, and it has to pass the lower house as well before it goes to the Governor General if it's been passed. During a civil war in England, which was protracted and nobody won, it became a tie. The king and the rebels came to an agreement, and they signed what is called the Magnificent Contract, or the Magna Carta, and that took away powers from the king and allowed for democratic elections. Now, the people got to vote for the first time, and the representatives they voted for got to sit in the House of Commons in England, which was carpeted in green to represent the colour of the land that the farmers worked on. And the king got to appoint representatives to the House of Lords, and they sat in a room which was carpeted in maroon. And maroon represents the colour of blood, which is how the empire was expanded. It was expanded on the blood of the soldiers, the sacrifice of the soldiers. So that is why the House of Lords, or the Senate, is maroon, and the lower house, or the House of Representatives, is green. Green is representing the farmers, or the land, or the common people, and the maroon represents the royal appointees, or the lords, or senators. Thank you. That's part 2. Please join me for part 3.